Do, 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 do. Which window did I leave that open in? This always, now I'm gonna get a great like reverb. Do, 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 do.
I have two windows open, so it's like classic Preston.
There we go. All right. Welcome. Hello. My name is Preston Jacobs. We're going to be talking about some Ice and Fire here this evening. And somebody else went to the Cushing Library. They found even more about some early drafts from George. This one is pretty interesting. I don't know how much time this will absorb, but I'd like to bring up the Reddit post. It's some interesting stuff here. It truly is. Okay, so Common Cricket Reddit post. So we're gonna go through this on where George originally planned on having little pieces of dawn or little pieces of something called star silver in our story. And here's the whole background to it. Cushing Library at Texas A&M University hosts early drafts of George R. R. Martin's work. Famously, G. Steph visited the archives a few years ago. I've talked about all of G. Steph's visits in depth. Talked to G. Steph myself. He put in a lot of work. I highly recommend you check out his posts if you haven't already. This week, a friend made a trip to College Station, Texas, and noted intriguing unseen details in early drafts. So this is not Common Cricket that went, but his friend that hinted George's intentions. So this is really interesting. So Star, Silver, and Dawn. Probably the biggest revelation from the Cushing drafts was George's struggle with the Maester's role in the story's magic. So what the author is talking about is that in early drafts of A Clash of Kings, the glass candles make a sooner appearance. Some people go crazy about the glass candle mention at the end of Clash with Dany, and Quaithe talking about it. But there was a lot more with the glass candle. And in early drafts of A Clash of Kings, there was a sudden, every maester had a glass candle. At least every maester in the field had a glass candle. And there was a emergency meeting that they all had to go to. And they were all called to return to Old Town. And this was mostly deleted. There are a few remnants of it. For instance, when Theon goes to the Iron Islands, he finds that the Maester is gone. He asks about the Maester, and the Maester's gone. Well, the reason the Maester is gone is because he's gone to Old Town for the secret meeting. And it was noted that in these early drafts of A Clash of Kings, that glass candles were not just communication devices. They granted immortality. So in a sense, they were very much like the werewood, in the same sense that the werewood can send dreams, and it grants immortality because your soul goes into the roots. The glass candles were doing the same thing. They were sending dreams, but also they were granting immortality. So this is Nat, and you think, oh, this is a really crazy idea. George deleted it from Clash of Kings, but then he brought it back in A Feast for Crows. The glass candles, of course, returned, but George's original long prologue had Jaqen H'ghar not stealing a key, where the object of Jaqen H'ghar's desire is a mystery because we don't know what the key unlocks. But Pate straight up steals a glass candle and brings it to Jaqen H'ghar. And the glass candle is specifically said to grant immortality. So by the time George gets to A Feast for Crows, he reduces the number of glass candles. Like every maester having a glass candle and being immortal was kind of a crazy idea. And then he he reduces the number but keeps the powers the same. It seems that in the long Pate prologue, every archmaester had a glass candle. So he goes down and finds the archmaesters, like there's statues down there. This is why when you read the A Feast for Crows prologue about the archmaesters, they'll talk about their rod and staff, their rod and mask being of different colors and stuff. Pate goes down into the basement of the Citadel and like sees their rod and mask on these like statues and like steals a glass candle and then brings it to Jaqen H'ghar, gets all bloodied because he hides it in his pant leg. And then, of course, in the published version, we have no glass candles are rare. They're down to 4. The supposed 3, 1 green and 3 black, and it seems that Quaithe also seems to have access to one and such, but the immortality aspect has been removed. So that's the whole thing about that. So an important background though, nonetheless. So originally, a Clash of Kings introduced this plot thread, but it was pushed to A Feast for Crows. This is all true. A likely remnant in the publishing. Bran is learning that a Valyrian steel link on a maester's chain signified that he had studied the higher mysteries, i.e. magic. This is also true. However, in the June 1997 draft of A Clash of Kings prologue, there was a second metal link for magic. At Old Town, there were men who might know, but Cresson had never studied the ancient lore that maesters called the higher mysteries. Leave it to the priests and septons to bend your wits and to learning truths a man can trust in. The teacher had esteemed the teacher he had esteemed most once told him. I assume this is the teacher he had esteemed, perhaps retroactively. We can throw in Walgrave, but and Cresson had listened. On the chain around his neck were links of golden iron, soft lead and common silver, dark bronze and bright, lead, brass, even platinum. But none were star silver, nor Valyrian steel. He had never regretted that until now. Now, if you're forgetting, in the published version of the prologue, Melisandre talks about how there are secrets and that the Citadel doesn't teach. So when he's talking about his regret, he's clearly talking about regretting it because now he's dealing with magics, like evil magic, that he's facing Melisandre here. But it's an interesting that we hear about this star silver. Now, star silver, we can guess that it's later confirmed, but we can guess we're talking about meteor iron, the same stuff that makes dawn. But the question is does star silver have, one, does it have extra great power, which it seems to be even better than Valyrian steel, but it's certainly rarer than Valyrian steel. And so I think what's suggested here is that if Luwin is studying magic and he's at this level of knowledge, and we've already established that Luwin knows about shit, but he doesn't know all of the deep conspiracy secrets. Like he's just not there. If star silver is rarer, there are rarer, even lesser known secrets than the people that study Valyrian steel. So I would guess here that we're talking about the ultra big, ultra super secret stuff, like the nature of the wall, what's on the Isle of Faces, perhaps immortality, glass candles, even though at this point everybody had a glass candle. Maybe he was thinking that star silver would eventually be, the functioning of the glass candles or something extremely small, conspiratorial in nature that only a precious few would know about, So star silver suggests meteoric iron like dawn, House Dane's ancestral sword. It's unclear how star silver citadel Magic school differs from Valyrian steel. I mean, I think it's clear that it's something that's more elite and specific. It's cut from A Clash of Kings while Valyrian Link stayed. Yet George held on to this concept, and an early draft of Feast for Crows prologue was more explicit about the relationship between Star Silver, now Starfall Silver, and Dawn. Now, what's super interesting here is, and I'm going to make a jump, that the relationship here with Star Silver and George going from A Clash of Kings, getting cut and pushed to A Feast for Crows and getting cut, mirrors the Glass Candle relationship. That they're going hand in hand. So Pate had never troubled to study the ancient lore the maesters called the higher mysteries, leave such to the priests and septons, and bend your wits to learning truths that a man can trust in. Archmaester Walgrave had told him, this is stolen language. I mean, not stolen, it's his own. But like, George talks about this a lot, like, never throw anything away. So much of the prologue, straight up lines, straight up writing is that was cut from A Clash of Kings appears in the prologue and in Sam 5. So here he says, this teacher that he had esteemed. Well, it turns out it was Walgrave. I mean, he hadn't even invented Walgrave at this point, but it turns out it is Walgrave. And they do talk about Walgrave and Crescent knowing each other. So Walgrave had told him on more than one of his more lucid days, and Pate had listened. Walgrave's own chain had links of steel and iron, soft lead, common silver, bronze, dark and white, lead, brass, tin, copper, yellow gold, white gold, and red gold, even yellow, but none of Valyrian steel, nor the queer metal that the Citadel had called Starfall silver. So this is George straight up taking this old paragraph, seeing if he can make it work in A Feast for Crows prologue. Feels like it doesn't work, deletes it. Much of the same experience that Crescent is having, Pate is having. He's trying to put it over one to one, but it doesn't work in either place, apparently. Cuts it twice. Dawn's blade is pale as milk glass, and the Dane's seed is, of course, Starfall. Clearly, we're meant to make this connection implicitly. There's also association between Valyrian steel sword and Dawn. If sorcery is used in forging Valyrian steel, what is Dawn's magic? George tried introducing the information in Clash of Kings, deleted the passage, deemed it important enough to revisit in a Feast for Crows prologue, only to cut it again. Does Starfall silver still matter, or just a revelation delayed to the winds of winter? Now, one could say that, look, you could try to write this all off and say it's not that as important as you think, and that George was desperately trying to write. He was desperately trying to pump out A Feast for Crows. And we know that the prologue was one of the later things that he wrote. And he it could be that he was cannibalized. He was like, I need fucking material. So he grabbed his old Clash of Kings discarded stuff and was shoving it in just for text. And then, deleted it because it didn't work. And so that might be the only connection. Maybe I'm overhyping the connection between glass candles, the other aspect of A Clash of Kings, A Feast for Crows deletion. But I would like to think, and go with me on this train of thought. Like, when you think of a lot of fantasy swords that have, and I'm thinking very much about Stormbringer, Elric's sword. A lot of times these weapons will grant some sort of or magical item will grant some sort of immortality to somebody, or some degree of invulnerability on a like a constitutional level. So for instance, Elric is able to live longer as long as he keeps using that blade to chop up people and steal their souls. He lives beyond. And the same is true of, say, Frodo and Bilbo when they have the ring of power. It extends their life a little bit, right? And so I do wonder that if the glass candles were originally connected to Starfall Silver and not like the Valyrian magic, like there was something else that they were maybe they were associated with Starfall rather than with Valyria, and that the glass candles included bits of the meteor rock, that was the secret to the immortality. And I mean, remember, glass candles, they're called glass candles. Now, yes, like we can say that, you know, obsidian is a form of glass and all of that. But here he's also saying that dawn, pale as milk glass, that I do wonder if like the Starfall Silver, is that also seen as glass? And are the glass candles still, you know, made of the same glass as dawn? And is the immortality aspect of it from that, you know, this rarer thing? Because Bill making glass candles out of obsidian and just popping them all over, and everybody having hundreds of these freaking immortal maesters is a crazy idea. But if it's a little rarer, you know, this is really something precious, my precious, then, you know, maybe it would work. And I don't know if these ideas are something going around in his head, but it makes me wonder about Dawn. Like, does Dawn have some sort of power beyond just being a really cool blade? You know, why is it so valuable? Is it just a really neat Valyrian steel sword, or is there something about its ability to, I don't know, capture souls, increase mortality, things like that? Keep in mind that George, you know, in his Thousand Worlds series, wrote about whisper jewels, and you know, whisper jewels could actually take a piece of consciousness and it being in there forever. And you know, Night Flyers, the Royd's mother who's trying to kill everybody, is trapped in a whisper jewel. And so she, in a sense, that is, you know, immortality in the same way that the werewood is. You're uploading your consciousness to these items. You know, and so could the meteor that fell on Starfall be a crashed whisper jewel of some sort? Keep in mind that, like, stuff, you know, George loves having like leftover technology stuff. I mean, if you read like Windhaven, it's completely based on, you know, leftover solar sails that no one understands where they came from or whatever, but they're now using them as hang gliders. But you know, that's that. Second part of this is just about something called the wound. It's very clear that in early drafts, Ashai was called the wound. And it very well may have been that the wound was Valyria. Like that Valyria, the fact that we hear about dragons coming from Ashai in early a Game of Thrones might be a remnant of Valyria being Ashai. Like Valyria and Ashai being the same place, it being called the wound. And so it would make sense that dragons would come from Valyria as they're coming from the wound. And that, you know, Valyria being moved and all of this stuff is a later idea. That originally Valyria was in the Far East where Ashai was, and the area was called the Wound. And a lot of stuff makes sense when going through that. For instance, Brand 3, he specifically goes on this vision where he sees that beyond a shadow of the shadow, dragons are stirring beneath the sunrise. Well, that doesn't really even make any fucking sense, right? Like if dragons don't come from Ashai, like even though Jorah says dragon eggs from Ashai, but it does if he in the originally it said the smoking desolation of the wound. So originally that's where there was the doom, or something very similar to the doom, if not the doom. But it sounds like it was the doom, and the doom created the wound. And so his vision was just of what's past the doom of Valyria. Oh, that's where the dragons are. Well, yeah, that's all completely logical versus dragons being past Ashai, which now in the present story makes no sense. Like there are no dragons past Ashai. The dragons are from Valyria. Now people talk about, the fireworms and the breeding and the genetic engineering that the Valyrians did. So this idea that dragons are stirring beyond the sunrise of Ashai makes no sense in the present story, but it does when you think like originally George planned for the area of Ashai to the far east to be Valyria, to be the wound. So, but that's that. Anyway, thank you for letting me talk about all of that for a bit. And let's go into things here. Going over Clash Crescent prologue when? Probably pretty soon. I don't know if I was going to get into, if people want to have me rather go into Sworn Sword versus jumping right into prologue of A Clash of Kings. Prologue's a long one. It's going to be like 2 hour fucking session. Got to prepare for that. This is an interesting idea. Dawn records the muscle memory of everyone who wields it and transfers the data to the current user. So unskilled users equal bad data. So only the best can carry it. Oh, I was going to take it another way, in that if you wield Dawn, you're automatically a great fighter because it has all the abilities of the previous owners. That would, if we take it as like Dawn contains all of the skills of the previous owner, and therefore if you wield it, you have all of the skills of the previous owner, it completely explains Dark Star's like insult. Like when they're like, oh, Arthur Dayne was a great knight, and he's like, he had a great sword. Like he's trying to say that Arthur Dayne wasn't that good of a fighter, which objectively is just fucking wrong, right? We know that Arthur Dayne was fucking master, but he's saying it's just his fucking sword. But how much can a sword really make you a really great fighter? You know, it's nice. It's obviously nice to have it. It's like taking a really, great guitarist and giving him a shitty guitar. He's still going to do a really good job on it. It's going to sound better on a great guitar. But, what a fucking great, he was a great knight, Sir Ares Oakard put in. He had a great sword, Darkstar said, and a great heart. That's it. Arthur Dayne was actually a shitty sword fighter. It would also really explain, like, if somehow if Arthur Dayne's dropped his sword, it would explain why, like, Ned and Howland Reed could defeat him. That like, oh shit, I no longer have the knowledge in the sword. See, I'm not quite understanding the unskilled users equals bad data, so only the best can carry it. Like, I just think that you know, they just vote whoever gets it, and then they become the greatest. It's sort of like Shazam, right? You're just taking a kid and you're giving him Shazam powers, and he becomes a fucking great superhero. But the same thing is true of like the Sword of the Morning. Like you just become the greatest fighter because you have all of the abilities of the previous ones. Like it's getting a little complicated with the whole like are you compatible? You have to, because it's like you have to be good. You have to be good enough to become even better. Just have it be like, oh my god, I have all of the abilities of like everybody in there. Ah, that's it. Dawn is a whisper jewel. Dawn is a whisper jewel containing all of the abilities of previous owners. So Ghost being the fanfic's epilogue, because prologue, epilogue, point of views die, right? Does writing the fanfic give you a deeper appreciation for A Song of Ice and Fire? So my plan is, yes, that like Ghost will be in the fanfic, that the Ghost will be the fanfic epilogue. But when I talk about the point of views dying, you got to remember that when Veramir Six Skins talks about Second Life, he talks about it in like a thing that you eventually like blend into the wolf, that you kind of eventually just lose yourself. Like, yes, you're living a second life, but it fades and fades over time. Now, does the point of view die? Like, I mean, keep in mind that it's not a perfect, even though George himself has talked about the people in the prologues and epilogues dying. That doesn't happen in the Storm of Swords prologue. Like he doesn't die in it. And so it's not perfect. I mean, people could argue like, oh, he died like soon after, but it's just not. You're talking about Chet. Like Chet doesn't die at the end of the Storm of Swords prologue. He pisses himself. That's it. And then he goes into battle, and apparently within whatever 30 minutes he does die. But he doesn't die then. So, but I was thinking, if there is a death in the prologue, it would be in the epilogue. It would be, John losing himself in the personality of Ghost. But maybe Ghost would die too. I don't know. I haven't thought about it too much. I just think that there's an interesting story element to Ghost being the epilogue. And does the writing the fanfic give you a deeper appreciation for A Song of Ice and Fire? It does. It makes me understand a lot. I planned on now that I'm pretty much at the halfway point of the book. I was planning on doing a video about how the experience has made me understand the problems with the Winds of Winter and why George got stuck, and what's so hard about it. It's and I mean, the appreciation is that it's a really, really complicated story, but I had that appreciation before. But it's sort of like, I think it's appreciation in the sense that like I now understand fully how difficult the Winds of Winter is and how it was an impossible task for George to finish, given his current life and everything. That to finish it requires him to drop everything in his life and not have all these personal issues going on and buckle down and do a lot of work, but then also, make really big, bold choices with the story in order to wrap stuff up really, really fast, which he's unwilling to do as well. So, I mean, I'll get into a long video eventually on it because there's a lot I have to say about it, but it's, I mean, the long and the short of it is you need half the book to wrap up all of the plot threads that you created in A Dance with Dragons. And we've seen George's writing style for the Winds of Winter. We've seen Arion 1 and 2. We've seen, Um, we've seen um, how he was writing the Battle of Fire with all these points of view and big descriptions. It's just it was not going to be fast. Like it wasn't going to be like Whispering Wood where battle's done. Um, one chapter, half of actually Whispering Wood is tiny little bit of that cat chapter. Um, so it's I definitely appreciate what a incredibly hard lift it is. I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, he's a writer; he can just sit down and fucking shit it out." No, it's really fucking hard. It's really fucking hard, and he just can't do it. He just can't do it. Yeah, Hollywood is a fucked up place, and I'm honestly heartbroken about Hayden Panettiere. May her family find peace. Yeah, and I see this problem with a lot of I felt sad in the same way after Carrie Fisher's death and things like that. Like there's a lot of stress, especially on women in Hollywood. There's just not as many jobs. Um, at a certain point, there's as a society, we don't deal with people that have depression and are struggling who as much. And I don't know what the solution is. But it's something that shook me because it's like it's not I loved Heroes season 1. It was so fucking good. And it's just such a weird thing when it's save the cheerleader, save the world, and then it's like, well, we didn't, and it's just one of these sad things. Like that's the line that I think about when I think about her, and it's like, oh, we as a society failed to save her, and it's really sad, and it's like, what is happening to society? Like maybe it's always been bad, but this incredibly talented, beautiful girl that like beautiful woman that everyone in society like loved, and yet she is struggling, and we can't do anything to save her, or don't do anything to save her. It's so, yeah, it hurt. It affected me a bit. In the fanfic, do you only use idioms that have already existed in the Song of Ice and Fire? Are there idioms George uses that shouldn't exist in Westeros? Oh, there's a lot of stuff that there's a lot of stuff that shouldn't exist. I mean, in Westeros, but yeah, no, I've invented a few idioms that are in there. I think one thing though that I noticed with George's idioms is that they're often based on idioms in our world. So like crow calling the kettle black, or crow calling the raven black, is obviously the pot calling the kettle black. So like if in the last Jaime chapter he uses he didn't know him from Pate, which is an idiom we use. I didn't know his face from Adam. So like if you say I didn't know that guy, you say I don't know him from Adam. And so there's one in there that says I didn't know him from Pate. But when a good one shows up, I think there's a couple more examples, but I can't remember them off the top of my head. I do try to like come up with like good things that sound like idioms that are in there. I think the father is a sure paymaster. I put in the Hota chapter. That's an old medieval idiom. God is a sure paymaster. And so I decided that like, oh, that's a cool one. So let's pop that in. Stuff like that. But I do like the medieval idioms, like idioms when I can, when they fit and flow. So yeah, you'll find in the Jaime chapter, he didn't know him from Pate, which I actually think makes more sense than he didn't know him from Adam, because Adam's not a common, we would say he looked like a Joe Schmo. You didn't know him from a Joe Schmo or something. It's like, it makes a little more sense than Adam. Um, but yeah, the ones that shouldn't exist. First of all, there's a bunch of Shakespeare stuff in Ice and Fire. There's Spectre at the Feast. There's Pound of Flesh, and there's Band of Brothers. Those are the three. Those are the three that I know. Band of Brothers comes from Henry V. Spectre at the Feast comes from Macbeth, and Pound of Flesh from Merchant of Venice. But all three of those are used in Ice and Fire, which makes no sense. I mean, obviously, like what? Like, is there a Shakespeare? And I mean, obviously, there's linguistically, like, none of it should make sense because, like, English is a combination of French and Old German and mixing together with all of these different pieces of language that come from here and there. And when people in Westeros use these words, like, that it would reflect an etymology of our world, which they don't have, but yeah, it's there's all sorts of these things. I think occasionally they say, I think occasionally they say fire and arrow, which instead of loose and arrow, I think that's said a few times. Because obviously fire and arrow would come from a gun. You fire a gun and then it going back to becoming, we only say fire and arrow because we have guns. But there's, you only need to take a single chapter and read it like slowly, and you'll find some sort of anachronism. It's not hard. It's pretty constant in there. So. Star metal was used in Conan. Was more dark blue gray. I mean, there's something mystical about the star metal. Like, obviously on the Kaaba in Mecca, there's a meteorite on the corner that you can touch. I mean, if you want to fight you got to really fight to get to it, because it's always crowded with people trying to touch it. But there is always something like mystical about, this like star forged iron and stuff like that. There's something incredible and mystical about these otherworldly stuff. I met some geologists. Geologists once told me that all gold on Earth is probably extraterrestrial, because the idea is that, like, when Earth is full, like, forming, gold is incredibly heavy. So when it's a hot magma ball, the gold is going to sink. And so geologists think that the center, obviously we have no verification of this, but the geologists think that the center of the Earth is just filled with gold. But then the question is, well, how did all this gold end up on the surface? Well, extraterrestrially, like gold meteorites hitting, like after the Earth cooled. So, like, all that's, there. So, is it possible that there's been more than one long night? Could the others be coming back to stop humanity from advancing technology? I mean, I suppose we don't really know the mysterious past of Westeros. What we kind of get a picture of is that there's this long night. There's every once in a while there's huge kind of random explosions. So we've got this one in Valyria and we've got one in Hardhome. And so I would theorize that the long night is a nuclear winter, that some sort of nuclear bomb went off, and that that they associate it with the uneven seasons, but that it's actually something else, that it was a nuclear winter. But whether it is or not, it's I guess it's not, it's not that important to the story. But there is a big mystery on, like, why civilization has been in the Middle Ages for so long. I mean, that's just not explained in other stories. Like, why Middle Earth has been in the Middle Ages for thousands of years is never explained. So, maybe there's no explanation to it, but technology is an important thing in Westeros. Like clearly there was a technology to build Storm's End and a technology to build the wall that we don't have, that the society doesn't have in the contemporary story. Whether it was magical or technological, or whether there's a meaningful difference between those, who knows? But clearly the past was more technologically advanced, and we're kind of the society's in an interregnum. But if the others, the thing is about the others being the thing keeping humanity back is it's been 8,000 years and they've done shit. So, you'd think that they would have to come back every 1,000 years or something, to push them back, rather than 8,000 years. So that's the only thing that makes me think that like the others aren't keeping them back technologically. That something else is keeping them back technologically. Maybe the Maesters. Maybe you could argue that the uneven seasons are just, devastating to their society, or something. But, it's I don't know. I don't know if there's a good explanation. 8,000 fucking years. 8,000 years trapped in the Middle Ages. It's a fucking long time. Long time. Plus, because it's like the whole world too. Like, who's pushing him back in Essos? Maybe it's just something that's just not explained. What do you mean by dawn? Arthur Dane's sword. Good theory, but it's definitely just dropped foreshadowing from the draft. Well, the thing is George just kind of writes a bunch of. George also just writes a bunch of random shit and hopes that something comes out of it. Do you think the Red Priests are using glass candles for immortality? Could explain Mel's long life and maybe Makoro's survival at sea. Yeah, I don't know. I personally don't like Mel being super old. I think it's a bit silly without any real explanation. Like what, ridiculous things like people not sleeping and stuff like that. You're like, come on, people need to sleep. I hate stories that just throw in a character that doesn't sleep. Like, fine, well, let's just have a character that doesn't have blood, or a character that just doesn't walk, they just float. It's like it's a fundamental part of like life is sleeping. Like every animal on the planet sleeps. It's really fucking important, fundamental. Just throwing in this very fundamental thing about life that or at least every vertebrate animal sleeps. I don't know. I can't, you said, tell me jellyfish or whatever, or mussels sleep. No, but I think every vertebrate animal sleeps. So it's an essential kind of thing. Cause you need sleep for memory formation and stuff like that. So you'd be a goldfish if you didn't sleep. But yeah, we don't hear about her using a glass candle. Like it's very clear that Mel doesn't have the ability to send dreams, or else she would have used that kind of stuff. She has the ability to receive them. Maybe somebody seems to be sending stuff to her legitimately, but her skill set is not communicating with people across distances, or else she would be communicating with Stannis, and she clearly cannot do that. She does not have Quaith's abilities. So I don't think she has a glass candle. But for immortality, is she using something similar? Like the idea that maybe the gem on her brooch would be some sort of similar kind of whisper jewel kind of stuff. Um, Maybe. As for Makora's survival, let's see. I have no idea about that. You know, is Makoro Marwyn? Is Makoro? What's Makoro's deal? It's weird when you actually go through Makoro's visions. They're not very impressive. Even though Victorian is very impressed by them, but of course the hand thing though is pretty impressive. Whatever he's doing with the hand, whether it be a glamour or whether it's legitimate healing, the hand thing is kind of crazy. But yeah, surviving at sea for days would be pretty tough. Maybe got to think about how Makoro survived that. I haven't put much thought into that on a good explanation, because it's like it's lazy just to be like it's magic. Like you want to be like, what is a good legitimate reason for why he survived so long? What, to create some sort of plausible deniability. Like I think the best magic in the story is there's a plausible deniability. And that's how George works. Like with regards to, I know most people believe the shadow babies threw Courtney Penrose out the window, but the people in the story are like, well, probably just somebody broke in or climbed down from the roof into Courtney Penrose's window and then threw him out. Like, you're like, oh yeah, that would work. Like, you've got some sort of explanation on how it could be done, so that you can have the debate. So I'd like to know, yeah, like Makoro, like what exactly did he do to survive at sea so long? What is he doing with that hand? Or is George just fucking writing? Why doesn't Stannis have a Kingsguard, not even a Lord Commander? It's a good point. He may feel that he should establish his own Kingsguard, just like Renly established his own Kingsguard, and just like Dany is establishing her own Queensguard, right? All of that he should be doing that. I mean, Sweet Robin is establishing his own Kingsguard. Why isn't Stannis doing it? The only explanation I have, and it's not a great one, is that he views the Kingsguard in King's Landing as his Kingsguard, and that he needs to like somehow grab them back. Like that's his Iron Throne, and those are his Kingsguard. However, if I were really in like the Stannis logic of it, he should establish any Kingsguard that were appointed by Robert would be legit Kingsguard. So he would see Barristan Selmy, Jaime, Boris Blount, Meryn Trant, Aerys Oakheart, as real. Well, Aerys Oakheart's dead. Preston Greenfield's dead. So he would see them as real Kingsguard. And then he would, if he sees like a usurper king like Joffrey, anyone appointed by Joffrey should be illegitimate. So I think he should be able to he should appoint, logically speaking, I think he should appoint new Kingsguard. Because he's the king, he could at least appoint, three or four spots. And then he'll deal with the others. Like, he could make the comment like, when I take King's Landing and I take the heads of Boris Blount and Meryn Trant, then I can appoint new Kingsguard. But he should see, whatever Kettle Black and Balon Swan and the Mountain, Robert Strong. He should see them as illegitimate. They're appointed by fake kings, usurper kings. So he's the king. So you're right that he should have his own Kingsguard, but he should start he should start appointing few people. I mean, especially Rich. I mean, Richard Horp would be first and foremost, like would be his, right? Like you'd think that that dude would just be the man. Or if you want to go another way and say, well, Stannis is maybe he's more savvy and he's waiting to use the spots as for people he's going to treat with. Oh shit! Even Aegon started appointing his own Kingsguard. So you're right. Stannis should be totally appointing Kingsguard. That's ridiculous that he hasn't. I'm with you. I'm with you. The only explanation I have is that he sees the Kingsguard that's there as his. They're just not in his possession, but he should see the new ones as illegitimate. Beep, beep. Which point of view knows the most truths? Euron, Mel? Well, Euron's not a point of view, but Mel is pretty clueless. We've been in her head. Um, I think one of the interesting things about the point of views is that it's always the most clueless characters, right? That don't have very good um, hold on the game. I mean, this is why like you're never gonna have a Littlefinger or Varys like point of view. They would just Quaith point of view. It'd just be too much. And so you need to have your point of views be a bunch of fucking dumbasses, right? Ned, Bran, Arya, Sansa, fucking dumbasses, all of them. Um, Victarion, dumbass. Aaron, dumbass. Theon, dumbass. I mean, they're all fucking dumbasses. That's what's great. It's great that we have such. I mean, if I'm thinking like who's the. I mean, is Tyrion? Is Tyrion would be like the best you got? Tyrion and Catelyn would be like the best you got in that like they understand a lot about the world, even though they don't have a full knowledge of everything. That's like they are the most intelligent characters to ever be points of view, and therefore they like Cat and Tyrion like can tell you the most about the world, but still they're out of it. Um, like I mean, Jamie knows a lot of history, but there are no points of views that really understand the story very well. I mean, maybe at this point you could say that Bran is getting a whole bunch of mystical werewood knowledge or something, but man, no, this is like who's the tallest dwarf, It's like which point of view knows the most truths. Like that's the whole thing, man. The point of views are fucking idiots. They're all fucking idiots. Mel knows nothing. Um, she has her like crazy religion with a very specific view and scope on the world. She gets flashes of stuff where she she has no clue what it is. Euron probably does know a lot, but he's not a point of view. Just like Varys and Littlefinger know a lot, but they're not points of, or Doran Martell. When you talk about like or Bloodraven, right? Like these, or Aleros, like I'm picking these characters that likely know a fuckload, but they're never going to be points of view, and so we're never going to know what's going on in their heads. Everybody else is a wonderful dumbass because the story has to be mysterious for us, right? Um, Hello, Preston. Just read Fever Dream. Any larger thoughts on the vamps forming culture and fixing their reproductive issues and the others? Thanks. Oof. Now, keep in mind, it has been a good 10 years since I last read Fever Dream. 9 years maybe. But now I'm trying to remember. There was that like there are a bunch of subplots in the middle where like Joshua York like talks about the problems with their society. And I'm guessing there is probably something how there's just fewer and fewer of the vamps. Let me because really, realistically, if they were like living these long lives, they should have plenty of kids. They got plenty of opportunities to have children. Um, in this pre-industrial society, you think like pre-industrial society where women have long fertility periods, you should be popping out so many kids. Um, but I'm trying to remember what exactly. Here we go. Uh, but it would certainly right because see, this is all coming back to me. I'm like, okay, wasn't there that Valerie, the purple-eyed vampire that was like an Ashara Dane? Wasn't there something about Joshua York maybe wanting to have children with her? Or am I making all of this up? Trey the Explainer needs to come in and talk to me about the 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 vampire reproductive problem on there. Um, if anything, if I'm thinking about it in a George R. R. Martin way, the vampire, like if he's reusing the reproduction bottleneck issue, which is like Dark were the tunnels. And Dark were the tunnels, you got two societies, one on the moon and one on Earth. And they're not large enough populations to create enough genetic diversity to pop out lots of kids. And so they're in population bottlenecks, which is what happens when like animals get down to like endangered levels. They just can't produce enough offspring. So it's like because the more genetically diverse you are, the more fertile you are. So if you're literally having children with your sister, like you're just not producing as many kids as if you're having children with a person from Cambodia. Okay, like if you're a white person in America and you have a kid with you're with a Cambodian, you're just going to be a lot more fertile than you are if you're having children with your sister. Like that these are just like biological facts. And I know that the vampire communities had gotten small. And so I think if I'm thinking about it correctly, and I might be totally misremembering, if the Damon Julian faction and the Joshua York faction rejoined, you'd be doubling your genetic diversity. And so you'd have like better reproduction if the two factions like joined again, in the same way as like the Dark were in the tunnels with the moon and the Earth and all of this. So I think the idea, I mean, and again, it's been 9 years, but I think the idea is that like once Daemon Julian is killed and the vampire factions like join, their population bottleneck would be solved. And I'm thinking, this is one of the things I thought about with the others. Like, I thought that the others' numbers would probably be small from population bottlenecks, and they're sitting there getting these incredibly inbred babies to have to produce, have children with, and they would just be unable to produce very many of the others. But that was my original idea. But then I kind of found out that like, oh, George's um, original concept is that they were called Neverborn, and so there was never a situation where they were having children, and so I don't know if the population bottleneck thing applies to the others. Like I thought that this is a pretty cool idea because I'd read Dark with the Tunnels, and I was like, okay, there needs to be some sort of connection where the others and the humans have some sort of peace. But then it's like, well, now they're never born, so they're all Crasters. They're all Craster's kids or whoever was being sacrificed before Craster. They're super inbred. Is it a problem if they're super inbred, or do they need to be super inbred in order to have the right genetic markers to do whatever they do? I mean, the Valyrians, for example, need to be inbred in order to have those recessive genes, right? So do the others need to be super inbred to be able to do whatever they're doing? I don't know. I originally I did think that George was going on that, but now that the show is out, and I'm like, oh, he just really he wanted them to be global warming or whatever. He wanted the others to be a metaphor for global warming. I was less sure about that, but yeah, I mean, so now what are the reproductive issues of the others? Well, are they happy about their inbred babies? Are they happy about? Do they need to have specific genetic markers on them? Do they have to be? Do they have to be special like Starks with their direwolves? Do they need that? This is why I was thinking like Bloodraven having abilities, having telepathic markers. Do the others need telepathic babies? And therefore they're trying to get super inbred ones. Does that mean Gilly has telepathic abilities? Right? Shouldn't Gilly be super special and Gilly's baby be super special? Or is it only the boys? Is it some Y chromosome thing? I don't know. Imagine George R.R. Martin never wrote A Song of Ice and Fire. He'd be the most well-known weird sci-fi hippie stories than Beauty and the Beast. Yeah, I mean, I think he was getting to the point where he'd probably have some, if he didn't do A Song of Ice and Fire, he'd probably still have some successful books. And he'd be remembered. I think he'd be remembered as this like as a sci-fi writer in the same way a lot of his friends are. If you're in that sci-fi niche, them, but outside of the sci-fi niche, you'd know them and respect them. But outside of that sci-fi niche, you'd be like, okay, whatever. It's like, fame is a weird thing because, I work for the government and I see people fighting and fighting and fighting and to be deputy assistant something or other. And you're just like, who fucking cares, man? Like you're just attending meetings all day for $10,000 more a year, $20,000 more a year. Like totally not worth it. But to them, they feel important. They feel important to be deputy assistant secretary of something. It's just it's insane. Like when you start thinking about how unimportant these positions are, and how hard it is to really achieve fame. Like think about like who was Secretary of Transportation under Taft? Did it even exist back then? It doesn't matter. Like it's lost. It's lost to history. We're all going to be lost to history. It's fine. But it's it's a funny thing about like fame. Would George R.R. Martin be famous? Well, no. I mean, none of us are famous, and even famous people aren't that famous, right? Like they fade. The people that I thought were super famous and big when I was young, some of them are no longer famous. There's a fucking great Portlandia episode where they get this new maid, and she's going around cleaning their house, and they're like, "Oh my God, is that Amy Mann?" Now, if you're my age, Gen Xer, like Amy Mann, she was a big deal. But of course she's completely forgotten now, completely utterly forgotten. And so they're like, "Oh my God, their new maid is Amy Mann." And they go up to her and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I just want to tell you, like, your music is like so inspiring, and you like changed my life. And I just want to say, like, thank you for all you've done. And also, when you clean the kitchen, can you make sure you get behind the toaster? Because like I saw some mess there the other day, and like, and I was just like, one of the funniest fucking like things I've ever fucking seen. Like, it's so, but I think about that a lot. Like, man, like the some of the people that I literally worship, like literally, like oh my God, they were so incredible and inspirational, and their music meant so much. And they never went anywhere, and they're very small, and they're just normal people. Like, but yeah, George would just be a sci-fi writer. Thank you for all the content in the midst of fatherhood. Thank you. It's been great. Here, let's see here. Boop boop boop. Oh, there she is. This I took today. There she is. She's doing great. Yay. Yeah. She's doing a little smiling. Did both Viserys and Daemon marry women from the Vale? Oh, why did both Viserys and Daemon marry women from the Vale? There must have been a better option for Daemon. So, I actually go over this. I know people are very sad that my going over House of the Dragon, or over analyzing House of the Dragon series. I haven't done anything on that in quite a while. But I actually answer this question and go over it fairly in detail. So the answer is Viserys and Daemon married women from the Vale because they were trying to balance and react to Rhaenys, the queen who never was, and Corlys Velaryon, to maintain that they had a power, like the power. So, you got to remember at the time, right? Viserys, he's got Drogon, or not Drogon, he's got Balerion. Like Balerion, he rides Balerion once, and then Balerion dies, so he has no dragon. And Daemon has a dragon, and Rhaenys has a dragon. So, and those are all of the ridden dragons in the fucking world, okay? Like, it's right, because near the end of their life, like Alysanne stops riding, and Alysanne is neutral on the Viserys versus Rhaenys fight, and Jaehaerys stops riding and stuff like this. So they need to have an army, or else Rhaenys could take over, especially with the Valyrian fleet. And so they need to pull in the Vale. And so they do that. They both marry women from the Vale. Viserys marries the most important house, and Daemon marries the second most important house. And it works. They end up securing their power. But that's, and what I'm amazed about this, because this isn't even like, is that House of the Dragon, Ryan Condal recognizes the same fucking thing, and they actually have the line where they explain like why they got married to women from the Vale, and they're like, there was a no bigger army than the Vale army. Like they actually say it, I think, in the episode 4, like at the party. They have that party in episode 4 where Daemon returns, and where he has that they talk about they want to go look at tapestries, and then Viserys farts. Like it's in that conversation. They bring up the Vale army. So yeah, maybe I'm pulling this out of my ass based on the text that logically speaking that they should be looking for an army to counter Rhaenys. But Ryan Condal came to the same conclusion and put it in House of the Dragon. So, I'm not saying it was necessarily George's intention, but both me and Ryan Condal read Fire and Blood and came to the same conclusion about that they married people from the Vale for the army to secure power over the queen who never was. Would have you considered bringing Jon's point of view back by transferring Jon's consciousness from Ghost to Jon's body? It could occur sometime after Jon's resurrection, so we still get the inhuman Jon first. I mean, it's not that I haven't considered that for the fanfic. It's just that I don't think it's necessary. And you have to make hard choices about shrinking the story. Like the story is fucking huge. And you got to make some sacrifices about removing points of view and such. I mean, I do think that if George were even going to bring back Jon, it would be the end of Jon's point of view. It's just too much. It's just too much space. It's very clear that he created the Melisandre point of view. Well, one, because he was in the middle of a writer's block on what to do with the North there, but also by creating a Mel point of view, now you can have stuff happening at the Wall without the Jon point of view. But it's just, I haven't heard a very compelling or interesting story on why we need Jon's point of view back. Like there's so many fucking points of view in the North. Keep in mind, you've got Bran, you've got Davos, you've got Theon, you've got Asha, like you've got Mel, like you've got 5 points of view up there. What do you need Jon for? Like, what do you need Jon's point of view for? Not to mention, you have to have the fucking others like invade and start fucking killing people. What's the point of all of these points of view? Like, what's the point of Jon's point of view? Like, if somebody had like a really bold, interesting reason for it, that'll be one thing. But I don't necessarily see any need for it. And this is very different than, say, like, when people are like, oh, how dare you bring back Quentyn point of view? Well, Quentyn had a really important point of view for inside of Meereen, and then someone to follow a dragon back. And you needed that point of view to deal with that plot point. I just don't see anything near Jon's body that can't be done with Mel. If Jon were in the middle of Winterfell, like, we need a point of view in Winterfell, and we have no point of view in Winterfell. That's a problem. Like, how do you deal with that now that Theon is gone out of Winterfell? Who is the point of view to dealing with Ramsay and Roose and Mance Raider and all the stuff that might be happening at Winterfell. But Jon's not there. Jon is at Castle Black, and Mel's at Castle Black, so there's no need to resurrect Jon. You know, that's the thing. I mean, for example, I don't know if I'm bringing back Barristan as a point of view, because where I have him, there's other points of view. So what's the point? What's the point of bringing back Barristan? He played his role as a point of view. I don't know. It's just I haven't heard a good like to resurrect Jon and then have Jon do what? Be killed again? What do we need Jon for? Is the real question. We've got 5 people in the North already. So you gotta, if I've heard a compelling reason for bringing him back, other than I really like him, he's a fan favorite, that's it. So, wait, are you not resurrecting Jon Snow? I don't think I find a need to resurrect him. I mean, I think I have a pretty good. The only thing with the North I haven't figured out is how to deal with like Ramsay. But like most of the stuff at the Wall, I have a pretty good idea on what I'm gonna do at the Wall, story wise. I've popped Davos at Eastwatch. I've got Mel at Castle Black. I'm gonna have Bran coming back. They're really covered. They're really covered on what's happening at the Wall. You don't necessarily need Jon, and after that, there's just a lot of story here. And so you got to make some hard decisions about what's going on. It's just going to Santo Domingo. Any pubs you'd recommend? So generally speaking, like what you want to do if you're there as a tourist is you want to head down to Zona Colonial, and there's just in Dominican Republic, they're called clamatos. Clamatos are essentially just convenience stores that put plastic tables in front of them and are bars at the same time. And people play dominoes and whatever. So you're going to go to, if you're going to be hanging out in Santo Domingo as a tourist, the big thing you want to do is you want to go down to Zona Colonial, and you want to, just walk around, find a cool clamato that's packed and happening, get some beers, hang out. And then when it gets later, there's all sorts of like little bars that have dancing, and you get to see everybody dance, and it's a really cool experience. But there's no like specific pubs that I know or can recommend, because I went my first time there. I did this stuff, but that was with when I was, my wife and I were just dating. We went to Dominican Republic, and we went out in Zona Colonial, but I went because I went back as a family man. I only went to Zona Colonial at night once in my whole 2 years there. And it was near the end, and I hung out at Clamato, and then everybody's like, "Okay, let's go dancing," and it's like, we got to go home and relieve the babysitter, like So all I can say is that, like, go to Zona Colonial, hit up a Clamato, have some beers, and then you will walk around and find dancing. It's not hard. It's there's lots of places, and it's really fun, and people are super friendly. And if you just want to sit around and watch people dance, that's fun. If you actually want to dance yourself, that's fun too. Any stranger is willing to dance with you. Like, dancing is not, it's not like in America where like you only dance with someone you're interested in. People are just like, let's dance. Okay. Like that's it. Like, dancing is not like, I like you, let's go home together. No, it's just like people are just like, yeah, let's dance. And you that's it. It's fun, it's open, it's great. So you'll have a great time. makes little sense if Westeros speaks one language. Oh, it's insanely dumb. But this is a common fantasy trope that people, speak the common tongue. This is just so people can travel around and communicate. But yes, the it's one of the silliest things, especially the North speaking the same language as people south of the neck, because the one argument that you're going to give on like why they all speak the same language is that the Septons spread it. Like that's the only thing you can do. And and so then they'd all speak the common tongue, and the common tongue is an Andal tongue, right? They're speaking their old tongue before that, right? So you could go with the other way and say, oh well, the Maesters somehow spread the common tongue, but that wouldn't really work because the Maesters only talk to the great lords, what a few hundred high class families. So none of the common people would be absorbing the language from them. Language doesn't trickle down like that, I mean, after the Norman invasion, like the royalty spoke French for a lot, plenty, and they read their Latin. Just doesn't mean the average Joe is absorbing any of that shit. And so it's this literacy and language flipping over is it's obviously like, you have to have some sort of institution that actually meets the people, which is why people talk about like, in our own history, like the spread of the Bible and literacy in that sense, like if there was one thing the spread of religion did do was the spread of literacy. The same with like, Middle East with the Quran, and the propagation of Arabic, even though the Arabic that people speak in different areas is massively different, stuff like that. But, so it's the one excuse you could have for everyone speaking the same language is the Septons, but then no one in the North should be speaking the common tongue. So it's a really simple, really silly idea. But it's just in a practical sense, he just wanted all of these characters to be able to talk to each other. And it's yeah, it's a weird thing. It's weird language. Keep in mind, George is an American. And so Americans, and maybe this is true of all the New World countries, but it's one of the things that's very striking about America is how culturally homogenous we are. And even though there's a lot of talk about red states and blue states and stuff like that, when you really think about like things like you can take someone from Maine and someone from Utah, thousands of miles apart, and their accent is really fucking close. The American accent does not change that much when compared to like the United Kingdom. Okay, like when you think about how much English, the variance in how people speak in the United Kingdom versus like America, our accents, they're not that far apart. They're just not. The difference between an American and a Canadian accent is not even very far apart. Like most people can't tell a Vancouver accent from like a Seattle accent. Like that's just so. But Americans get this idea that somehow like a vast area of land could be culturally homogenous, and that's just not the case when you're talking about cultures that are developing and living over thousands of years. Like the only reason that America is so culturally homogenous is that one, like Americans haven't been here this long. You're talking about a fucking 400-year history of whatever white and black America. I'm not talking about American Indians, but like, but white and black, white people and black people have been in America for 400 years. And so, and then you've got like TV and communication, being such a large part of the past, 80 years, right? To, maintaining some sort of, and then massive transportation and travel that also happened over this period of time. You talk to an American and you're like, oh, well, I'm from Boston, but I moved to St. Louis and now I live in Florida. Like that's a very normal story for an American. While a person in medieval Europe, it's like, well, I was born in this village. I live in this village. I'm going to die in this village. My parents were born in this village. They kind of, my grandparents were born in this village. So of course their like language changes and is isolated, and you don't have this like homogenization. So, it's so when you go to Europe and you're like, oh, well, Spain has how many languages that where they claim they're not Spanish? Like the most Spanish thing for a Spaniard is to claim they're not Spanish. Oh, I speak Valenciano. I speak Galician. I speak Catalan. I speak Basque. Okay. But it's the same when you get to Italy and their breakaway regions. And when you get to Germany and you're like, oh, well, in this part, they don't really speak High German. They speak some, you're like, okay. And then it's insane. Like once you get to Europe or Africa or Asia, where you go to the next town and it's a completely different language. That's just not the American experience or the New World experience, So you got to understand like a lot of this like modern fantasy literature, like Dungeons and Dragons, invented by a guy from Wisconsin. George is from New Jersey. Like they have this American mindset that you can have a vast land that's culturally homogenous, and that's just a silly concept. That Dungeons and Dragons would ever have that you'd have these adventurers traveling across the land, and of course, like you travel across the land in the Middle Ages. You go 100 miles, and they're speaking a different language. Right. So like you travel for a week, you can't understand anyone. That's just the reality of shit. And instead they break things down by like, oh, it's all racial. Like for some reason, all dwarves speak Dwarven and elves speak Elvish. Like why would they do that? It's like a fully integrated society where like dwarves and elves and humans are all like interacting in a city. And yet like they have these like racial languages, but they don't have regional languages very much. Everyone speaks common tongue. It's silly. Whole thing's silly. But it's I think it's just the idea of, one, the convenience of it for the plot, but two, like Gary Gygax, Wisconsinite, George, Jersey person, American mentality of thousands of miles of territory being culturally homogenous, which is just not how the rest of the world works, and just certainly not how medieval society works. Why does Alicent think about Jaehaerys on her deathbed? I have to find this quote. Trying to think like because Alicent, I'm trying to remember. Alicent goes crazy, right? In the end, and then let me bring up Fire and Blood for you, and I'll see. I mean, it's a funny thing because obviously, like Jaehaerys was hanging out with Alicent on his deathbed, but why indeed? All right, let me find Alicent's deathbed scene, because she just kind of She just goes nuts at the end, right? Um. Oh yeah, in her last days, the Queen Dowager seemed to become more lucid. I want to see my sons again, she told her septa. And Helena, my sweet girl. Oh, and King Jaehaerys. I'll read to him. As I did when I was little. He used to say I had a lovely voice. Strangely, in her final hours, Queen Alicent spoke often of the old king, but never of her husband, King Viserys. The stranger came for her on a rainy night at the hour of the wolf. Hmm. Um. Hmm. There's a lot to unpack there because so in the original Rogue Prince, there's a rumor that um, Alicent was sleeping with Jaehaerys, but I think that gets retconned out. But this portion of the Queen Dowager's like death, I think that is new to Fire and Blood, or if it did exist at the time the Princess and the Queen was written, um, it was not published. So I mean, it might be like an old remnant of like maybe she really did have maybe she really did have a sexual relationship with old um, Jaehaerys, and George is trying to shock us by having that. But I mean, I think in a simplistic sense, if we're looking for a simple answer, she's saying that her mind is going, so all of her later memories are dying, and she's returning back to her childlike beginnings, right? Because it says that she wants to see her sons again. Of course, all of her sons are dead, and Helena, of course, her Helena's dead too. Oh, and King Jaehaerys, I'll read to him. Well, now she's a child because she read to Jaehaerys when she was a child, when she was a, and so now she's back as a child again, and so she doesn't she, and the idea that she never speaks of Viserys is the idea that she never really loved Viserys. It was purely a opportunistic marriage, and therefore he had no place in her heart at all. Like even Jaehaerys, even she thought more fondly of Jaehaerys than Viserys, her own husband. Like I think that's just the thing. Like it's most striking that she does not think of Viserys at all. She has no affection for him at all. So you're fully admitting here that her marriage is completely opportunistic. That as her memories go away, she has nothing. She has nothing in there. At least she had fond memories of her children and Helena, but those went. And then you're supposed to think of her as a child. So I think that's being said at the minimum. That one, most importantly, she has no affection for Viserys, and that's a very important point. But two, she's regressing to being a child. If you want to go for the third thing, that she actually had a sexual relationship with Jaehaerys and actually like thought of him fondly, you know, I guess you could. I don't think it's necessarily important, but because what teenager has affection for a vegetable in a bed? I mean, it's which was Jaehaerys, right? Jaehaerys was a vegetable in a bed, but it seems illogical based on human experience that like Alicent would. But maybe she had like the Florence Nightingale syndrome. Maybe she felt fondly for him because she took care of him or whatever. But because she would have been like whatever, bathing him and changing his bedpan and shit like that. So I guess I do think that the most important thing is just that she's regressed to being a child, and she doesn't care about Viserys. If you want to take it a step further, is there implication that there was actually a relationship between Alicent and Jaehaerys? I guess that's the implication as well. George likes to shock us. But I think the first two are the more important thing. Wouldn't dragons be causing wildfires everywhere? Yes. I think that's it's definitely a problem in the Vale with Sheep Stealer. But I'm trying to think, like, most of the dragons are kept on Dragonstone, which doesn't have very many trees, and so they would just be like fishing for food or something. Like, you're cannibal, you're just like fishing. So you don't have to deal with the trees. The ones in King's Landing, they're domesticated. They live in the dragon pit. But yeah, when you're talking about these wild dragons, yeah, they would definitely be causing wildfires everywhere. I guess maybe it rains a lot, but the Vale is it's kind of dry, probably dry in those mountainous areas. Yeah, they would definitely be causing some wildfires all over the place. That's it's no good. It's no good. I mean, you could kind of claim that maybe it's just like lightning. Lightning causes wildfires. So would a dragon cause more cause more wildfires than lightning? I don't know. But yeah, they would. It's luckily there's not that many dragons who are ever in the wild roaming around Westeros. That's just like not a thing that really happens very much, with the exception of I mean, at the end of the war, what's his face goes to Red Lake. Is it Tessarion? Or does Tessarion get killed? Which one ends up at Red Lake? This is where like George was upset because he's like, dragons like volcanic areas. They don't just like live anywhere. He was like angry about it. It's like, but you yourself said like they went to Red Lake. Silverwing, not Tessarion. And so Sheep Stealer and Silverwing would probably be some problems. Yeah. Just started watching House of the Dragon. They left Lonmouth's brains on the floor for a week. The murder is at welcome feast for 7 days of celebration. I mean, not that there aren't a million fucking problems with that scene and that episode and the following episode because of it. I think is that the worst thing that the House of the Dragon did? I'm trying to think. No, the floor. The fucking no, I don't want to. No spoilers, Ross. But like, there's gonna be a fucking floor. There's gonna be a floor incident. Okay, that's gonna shock you more. It's like the second worst thing that they've done in the House of the Dragon is the Joffrey Lonmouth death. They don't leave it for a week because they essentially they're gonna have 7 days of celebration, but then after that death, they're just like, fuck it, let's just get this over with, and they have the marriage, and that's it, with the blood on the floor and everything, and it's ridiculous. But yeah, it's in the source material. There's an ambiguity to whether or not Kristen Cole murders Joffrey Lonmouth, And so he had plausible deniability on whether he killed him. In the show, there's no plausible deniability. Everybody fucking saw him beating the fucking death out of this guy for no fucking reason. And it was never explained. It was never explained. This is the heir's husband's best friend. He never suffers any punishment for it. In fact, he's only rewarded by Alicent for it. So it's a really weird thing. They never really explained it. It's the second worst thing to do in the show, I think, is Joffrey Lonmouth's death. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think Floor, Rhaenys on the floor is probably number 1, and Joffrey Lonmouth is probably number 2. I don't know if Daemon Targaryen fighting God in the Stepstones is up there. I don't know. Oh, no, maybe the fucking murder of his wife is so fucking stupid. That's the same episode. Oh my God. In an alternate universe where George writes Dream of Spring, could he resist doing a Dany Aegon Jon love triangle? Huh. That's the... I'm trying to think about what George was thinking about, because we have the show as somewhat of an example that there was clearly there was originally George's plan was that there was going to be a Jon, Arya, Tyrion love triangle. That's where the conflict really came in, is that Jon and Tyrion were going to be fighting emotionally over a woman. And then this gets shifted to Jon Dany, it seems. We even though Tyrion has not met Dany in the show, this is explored. But the beginning of the story, we establish a Jon Tyrion friendship, and then eventually, they would have a problem again at the end, be fighting over a woman or whatever. I don't think it would work. I don't think the triangle works very well, because Jon and Tyrion have just had too much time apart. I mean, even in a world where and that's just with the story advancing 2 years. Had it advanced whatever 15 years or whatever George's plan was, it would have been even worse. Who the fuck are you? We hung out for a month years ago. I don't give a fuck. It's not that big a deal. But that was clearly George's plan, was that there was the important aspect of Jon and Tyrion having tension. And so and I do think that Jon Dany, it's a little bit of a weak sauce, in the sense that we're already dealing with a story where Jaime and Cersei are twins, they're siblings, and they're having sex with each other. And that's pretty shocking. And then you're moving to an aunt nephew, and it's who cares? This is what you call the Cool Ranch Dorito problem, right? You eat that first Cool Ranch Dorito and you're, oh, that's something. You eat more trying to get back to the flavor of that first Cool Ranch Dorito, and you can't. Okay, you can never get back. Jon Dany just isn't shocking, because they're aunt and a nephew, in a medieval surrounding where that stuff isn't even taboo. So I never thought that was too interesting. Not to mention, like, John is, I know people like the John story, but John is a boring character. Like, he's not, like, Danny is has sparks of being interesting, right? She has sparks of madness, but for the most part, she's just kind of normal too, right? So you got two normal characters being in a relationship, then finding out your aunt and nephew. Like, that's just, it's not very, I just don't think it's very, like, I can name so many more interesting pairings that are just like fascinating. Like, when you just say, like, oh, Euron Danny, whoa, that's interesting. Like, Euron's fucking crazy. Victorian Danny, oh my God, really? That's fucking nuts. There's so many little things, or like any other pairings where you're just like, I could say Cersei Euron, whoa, that's gonna be interesting. Danny John, like, I don't like, I just, especially for like end book story, it's just so. And then you're taking Aegon, who, again, he's fine as a character, but he's not interesting. What's interesting about the Aegon story is John Con, because John Con's a fucking interesting character. Aegon, he's a 17, 18-year-old kid, like, who was a little immature and then acts rather mature all of a sudden. But he's surrounded by so many more interesting. Franklin Flowers is more interesting than him. Halden Halfmaester is more interesting than him. It's it'd just be like the John Aegon Danny love triangle. It'd just be like the most boring weak sauce love triangle I could possibly think of in the story. It's just, there's nothing to it. Like, these characters have never met, so I don't know how they'd react to each other. But none of the characters are like exceptionally fascinating. Like, they're not a Theon. Like, so Tyrion is more interesting in that love triangle, but it's also not realistic. Like, why would Danny like Tyrion? Tyrion is a noseless dwarf who's a piece of shit on top of it. He's an arrogant kinslaying, hideously ugly dwarf. Like, he's just not interesting. So I guess my problem with like all the relationships with Danny is just that, like, Khal Drogo and Dario are just much more interesting characters. So, like, her relationships with them make sense. What would Danny like about John? Like, think about that. Like, her two previous love interests are fascinating characters. John, okay. It's John. People get angry at me when I do my John trashing. But what a boring weak sauce. What a boring weak sauce love triangle, or what's a boring weak sauce relationship, John and Danny. Boring. Circling back to George's gays are warriors because swords are dicks conversation. You know who isn't a great warrior? Laenor. Was this an intentional clue? Wait, do we ever hear that Laenor is a bad warrior? In the show, Laenor is fucking fantastic, right? Fights in the war, is great, right? But I'm trying to think. We just never hear about it. I don't think we hear about him fighting. As Marriage. I mean, I guess we never in the source material we never hear about Laenor really doing much. I mean, he is a knight though, right? Yeah, he's a knight. He gets married. I mean, he gets married pretty young. The show added that he was put in the war, which I guess would make sense, but um road sea smoke. Yeah, I guess there's just nothing. There's just not, the problem is there's just nothing written about him in the in the in Fire and Blood. They make him go to war in the show. We don't know if he went to war in the books. It's possible, but it's just not mentioned. So yeah, Laenor is not. Oh, what's this is Carmine coming in. What's going on here? Oh. Oh, he was just sending me stuff about the topic and stuff. Yeah. G Steph also agrees that that perhaps the glass candle and the star silver were linked plots. Um, um, so what Longshanks is saying here is that so in the source material, there is it's ambiguous whether or not Laenor is actually gay, and it's ambiguous whether Laenor was bisexual, and it's ambiguous whether Laenor fathered children on Rhaenyra. The show has made them all like very clearly Harwin strong, but there's a lot of wiggle room in the Fire and Blood. Jace could be possibly Kristen Cole's. It could be Laenor's. Harwin Strong was specifically recovering from a broken collarbone during the period of Jace's conception. There's a whole the broken bones incident. So so there's this idea of like, was he having sex with a broken collarbone? Or was it actually Laenor's, or was it Kristen Cole's? All these sorts of things are in play. And then later on, the same person, Mushroom, who's claiming that Laenor is gay, is also claiming that he's the one that fathered Adam and Alan of Hull. So how does this all fit together? And so what Longshanks is saying is that if Laenor were actually gay, wouldn't George have been specific about him being a fucking incredible fighter, because all gay characters in Ice and Fire are incredible fighters? All right, this is this idea that Renly's a pretty good fighter, but Lynn Corbray and Loras and they're all great. They're all the and Blackfish. The idea is that like if you're gay in Ice and Fire, you're an incredible fighter. Like that's just it just goes together. And so therefore, had Laenor actually been gay and not fathered any of Rhaenyra's children, wouldn't he have been described as the greatest fucking fighter of the time? That is true. I mean, he makes a good point. He makes a good point. But realistically, it's just George was crapping this stuff out. So whatever. He wrote all this stuff super fast, and there wasn't much space. Oh, how will the performance of the New York Jets in the 2016 NFL season affect the release of The Winds of Winter? Well, this is sort of like how does like pouring weed killer on a desert affect the plant life? Like theoretically, if there were plant life there, the weed killer would kill off the plant life, but there's no plant life there. So like, will the Jets season affect the Winds of Winter? Well, I mean, George is more into the Giants, but he likes the Jets as a second. But like but both teams, it would have affected if you were writing, but he's not writing. So Winds of Winter is not happening. He's not writing. Winds of Winter isn't happening. So the Jets and the Giants are having no effect. It's like throwing weed killer in a desert. Like it's just, what's there to affect? There's, it would have, but if something were growing, but nothing's growing. It's beating a dead horse is what it is. When Joffrey is declared king, why don't the Lannisters press Tommen's claim to the Stormlands? Seems like a tell on the bastardy, or could have been used by Tyrion in one of the child separation plots. I'm trying to think about this like logically speaking, because okay, so if Stannis is ruled a traitor and Renly is dead, who inherits Storm's End? Shouldn't it be Robert? Shouldn't it be his Renly's nephew? So would it, wouldn't it be Tommen? But by the time, I mean, timeline wise, there's not, let's see. Renly dies probably 6 months before Renly dies like 6 months before Joffrey dies. Because the minute Tommen is made king, they don't think about that stuff. It's the same with like Jace not being the heir to Driftmark. They go for Luke, right? So, but the question is, in that 6 months of time, could they have pressed that claim? It's true, they could have, but the problem is that like it's Storm's End. So yeah, say you claim it, they're like, well, come and get it. Well, clearly they can't come and get it because it's Storm's End. But, and it might have been a bit much, then you're talking about like, they always say, the importance of the small folks as the leader being seen as legitimate. But you're right, in that 6 month period, Tommen would have a pretty good claim on Storm's End as Renly's nephew, and with Stannis being declared a usurper and disinherited. So I mean, they could have. It's kind of pointless if they're not going to conquer, if they're not going to conquer the Stormlands. you know, I mean, Tyrion, when Tyrion marries Sansa, I'm trying to think like how much of a claim was put on Winterfell at that point. Like, are you Lord of Winterfell, Tyrion? Um, it's it's certainly mentioned and thought about, but uh, they it's not pushed that much. They're still letting the Boltons do their fighting for them and stuff like that. Um, hmm. Yeah, they could have. They definitely could have. They could have had Tommen claim that he was Lord of Storm's End. I don't know how much time they would have put into it. So Preston wants to keep Jon in Ghost Body so he has the right of wolf sex scene. You're giving me good ideas, man. You're giving me good ideas. No, John chapters feel like a bit of a failure, important for narrative consistency and distinguishing fanfic from show timelines. Yeah, I mean the fanfic is turning out to be pretty violently different from the show, and where things going. But then again, I mean the winds of Dance with Dragons was kind of already there. When you're talking about so much of the story being Aeron and Victarion and Quentin and Asha and uh, all this, I'm trying to think of like and Hota and all this. It's and the Sam in Old Town and stuff like that. There's so much difference, really. Not to mention John Kahn, but yeah, like I don't know, like RxNV was talking about like different ideas for what to do with John, but it's like, oh, he's got to like fight the Weeper, wrestle the army back. It's a lot of but then what? To like retreat? Like would you do what the show did and keep everybody at the wall and have Dany go north and everything still rely on the wall and Winterfell the whole time? In the middle of winter and just have chapter after chapter of like armies being unable to march places and it's you know I find the North like it's exhausting in the sense that it's so logistically impossible. Like, and it was almost funny in the show that they didn't deal with any of it. Like all of a sudden they had the one scene with Stannis being caught in a snowstorm, and then the North was just freaking free. It was easy to travel. It's like the mildest winter of all time. Um, so I'd like the story to collapse towards Harrenhal and the God's Eye and have the ultimate secret of everything being on the God's Eye, rather than being everything stuck at the Wall or Winterfell. And so, if you're gonna have the story collapse back with the invasion of the others and everything, like what are you gonna have like John fight the others and retreat and or we're gonna have him go to King's Landing and treat with people and do all the things they did in the show. It just seems more simplistic to have everybody meet at Harrenhal and not deal with John like retreating with his wildling army. Uh, I don't know. It just there's certainly just not the time. There's not the time that the show like for the stuff that happened in the show. Like a love affair between John and Dany. Like, what are we talking? Like, think about these like really basic things. Okay, fundamentally, how much time do you think the Winds of Winter will cover? because Game of Thrones covered 1 year, Clash of Kings 6 months, Storm of Swords like 3 months, 3 or 4 months, Dance with Dragons another like a Feast for Crows, Dance with Dragons another like 4 or 5 months. Okay, so you think that like the Winds of Winter is going to try, like, let's say the Winds of Winter covers 6 months. Okay, Dany's getting to Westeros, and then she's got to fight her Dance of the Dragons. Okay, is she going to meet Jon then? And so now we're in the Dream of Spring, and it's like, do you want Jon and Dany to have this like how many chapter love affair where everything falls apart by the end of the book? Like 3, 4 chapters? Like how many chapters? Like it's just not that much. Like Dario has already had more time as a romantic interest with Dany than Jon could ever logistically have. You know, and like put it all together, like Jon getting resurrected and then somehow like taking control of like the Weeper's army and stuff like that. Okay, say you do that by the end of the Winds of Winter. Now we've got all this stuff to do in A Dream of Spring. It's just so much shit. It's just, you gotta, you know, you gotta make some choices and just cut some stuff. Like Jon's dead. Just let him be dead. Rereading Fire and Blood, a bit of a slog, of course. Do you think HBO will adapt any other stories from it besides Aegon the First? Which would you adapt, if any? Yeah, so they've got these plans for Aegon, which is funny because there's nothing in Fire and Blood about Aegon, right? It's like a really so the thing they were thinking about was the Nine Voyages section, which is only a few pages. But I think the most fascinating stuff is, I think, our like post Hour of the Wolf. Like, I think Regency of Aegon the Third is really interesting stuff, but I don't think it has enough battles for HBO. So when you're talking like battle wise, you could do Maegor. And that's about it. Like, I feel like you could do Maegor because that involves like this massive dragon battle between him and Aegon 1.5, and then him fighting the Faith and stuff like that. That would be interesting. And then you got Aegon's invasion, which is huge war. But the problem is that nothing else has enough battles. Even Maegor doesn't have enough battles compared to Dance of the Dragons, right? So not nearly as close, right? So I guess that's what they're going for. Like, how many battles can we have? How exciting can it be? So they're saying like after that, you'd have Aegon, and so I mean you could do something. I mean, it's not Fire and Blood. I guess it would be Fire and Blood Part 2. I mean, you could do Blackfire Rebellions. You could do Daemon Blackfire. That you could have some stories about, and that's pre Duncan Egg, and then you've got all the Duncan Egg stuff that can go on for forever. But you're left with very little. So you've got Aegon's conquest, you've got Maegor's wars, and you got the Blackfire Rebellion, and Duncan Egg is already covering a certain period of time, and maybe you could eventually cover, I mean, if you really wanted to, some Nine Penny King thing, but that's really and then Robert's Rebellion. But they're running out of. They're not going to adapt something that doesn't have some wars in it. So the only thing left to adapt from Fire and Blood is possibly Maegor. It's the only thing you could possibly do. Any thoughts about what the story is trying to say about incest? I feel like it's under-discussed in context of the story, big picture themes aside from Targaryen racial ideology angle. I don't think there's much to it. I think it's just there for shock value. Like, honestly, I think it's just there for shock value. I don't think I don't know if George is really saying anything beyond that. Like, there's nothing really to say about incest. Like, everyone kind of agrees incest is bad and icky and gross. And, you know, royals did it for political reasons. And when it appears not like there's something more, even like more corrupt to and weird to the idea that you'd naturally want to do it, because it goes against the fundamental basis of like human existence to want to do that. Like, human being, there's a reason Oedipus is one of the most remembered stories in history, and that's because it's a dude fucking his mom, and that's the grossest fucking thing that people can come up with. And it's why motherfucker is an insult in every culture and stuff like that. And even primates, even other primates don't have sex, don't do mother-son sex, right? So like, incest is creepy and gross, and everyone agrees it's creepy and gross. It's also like, when you think of other stories that have endured, there's Cain and Abel. Killing your brother is a really horrible thing. We all love our family, and the thought of killing your brother is horrible. The thought of killing your children is horrible. And so George, and this is why, like, what's also one of the biggest stories, like, oh, Cronus eating his babies, right? Like, you know, you think of these ancient tales, Cain and Abel, Cronus eating his babies, Oedipus, like, cannibalism. Cannibalism is another one. The Greek story of Pelops and you know what I'm talking about. The Greek mythology. Pelops and Tantalus and Pelops. Yeah, Tantalus and Pelops. Cannibalism, gross, especially cannibalism of eating your family, which is why, like, Titus Andronicus was Shakespeare's most successful play, because it's just so gross. You know, the idea of eating your own children is just horrific. It's fucking horrific. And these are just all there for shock. They're all there for, like, you know, to bring readers in. But there's no like big picture theme about it. Like, there's nothing to learn about exploring eating your children. Like, no one wants to eat their children. People don't normally eat their children. It's not part of the human condition. It doesn't tell you anything. You know, the things about a normal life, okay? The things in a normal life are falling in love, heartbreak, having people around you die, having people around you that you care about die, struggling against power, trying to earn a living, trying to be a good person, trying to live a meaningful existence, trying to impress your parents, trying to care for your children. These are all very human things that all human beings can relate to and are important. There's nothing important about, like, a story about a brother and sister fucking, okay? That is very, very rarely happens. It very, very rarely happens. No one can relate to it because no one wants to fucking do it. Nearly everyone on Earth goes through life never having to deal with that, okay? Or even dealing with, even knowing someone that's dealt with that. So it's just, it's the exact opposite of the Thoreau thing, like the human heart and conflict. Like it's there's nothing to learn about like incest or cannibalism or like eating your children or fucking your mom. Like none of these things are relevant to the human condition. The only thing there is I'm trying to shock you. That's it. George is just trying to shock you. There's nothing more to it. I um like I feel like the Targaryen racial ideology, like racism and racial purity and ethnic cleansing, that's fucking everywhere. That's fucking everywhere throughout history, and it's here right today. We can't fucking escape it. All that shit. Divine right of kings and who should be ruling and who should have the power. That's all fucking there too. It's still here. We still deal with it every day. You know what I don't deal with today? Like every day when I fucking wake up, I have to deal, like even as a white guy living in the suburbs, I still every day, like racism is part of my life. Like tyranny is part of my life. You know what's not part of my life? Incest. Incest has nothing to do. I don't know anyone who commits incest. I mean, when I lived in the Middle East, I knew some people married to their cousin. That's about it. That's the closest you can get. Like that's barely, you know, cousin marriages are barely, that's hardly qualifies historically as incest. Like it just, it doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't tell you anything about anything. Oh yeah, so that's my feeling, is that it's there only for shock. Because what important message does anyone have to say about incest other than it's gross? Like nothing, nothing. Not a lot of lightning in the story, to be fair. That's true. The Lightning Lord, but you're right that no, we haven't had any strikes of lightning in our story. Maybe we need to have maybe we need to have some sort of a lightning strike fire. There hasn't been many wildfires either, right? I mean, talking like forest fires. You know, we've had Winterfell catch on fire. We've had fires at the Red Wedding. I thought Allison stopping Sepoko implied her prot. So it means by the Sepoko, that's like the Japanese suicide thing, but let's go back to Alicent here. She died confessing her sins to her septus. She outlived all of her children and spent last years of her life confined in her apartments with no company but her septus, serving girls who brought her food, the guards outside the door. Books were given to her, needles and thread, but her guards said Alicent spent more time weeping than reading and sewing. One day she ripped all of her clothes into pieces. By the end of the year, she had taken to talking herself and had come to have a deep aversion to the color green. Ooh. Trying to see like when her, yeah. More immediate problem was posed by the Queen Dowager, who refused to reconcile with the new king. The murder of the last of her sons had turned Alicent's heart to stone. None of the regents wished to see her put to death. Some from compassion, others for fear that such an execution might rekindle the flames of war. Yet she could not be allowed to take part in life outside the court. She was too apt to rain down curses upon the king or snatch a dagger from some unwary guardsman. Allison could not be trusted in the company of the little queen. She had told Jaehaera to cut her husband's throat while he was sleeping, which set the child to screaming. Did she try to kill herself? Try to find. Oh. Let's see. Um, I'm trying to see if I don't know. It sounds like she could have killed herself with some like sewing needles or something if she wanted to. Would have been a. Or is it in the show? Is there a scene where Helena like grabs a dagger and she like stops her or something? Not sure. Um, George said that in Winds we'll see further north than ever. What are the chances that Bran continues north after he leaves Bloodraven? I think that logistically speaking, you've got two choices for you have two opportunities to go more north than ever. I know the quote you're talking about. So it's either Ghost somehow like just keeps going north and you've got a Jon perspective inside Ghost and he goes all the way up there. Or we're just talking about Bran in the werewood looking north. The problem with both is you'd have to keep that Jon plot, like Jon as a character and like Ghost like and starting the chapter that way. I mean, maybe it doesn't count for a new point of view if the chapter is just called Ghost, but it's still a long journey. Like he would still take like months to get up there. And I think when you're talking about Bran like going north, the problem is that like in a Game of Thrones, he already looks in a dream all the way north past the barrier at the end. So he's been to the end of the world already. So I guess maybe he means in a sense, kind of like in the show. You know how in the show he like looks north and he sees the others up there, and then they're magically teleported back south somehow. But they grab him or whatever. I guess it would be something like that. Like Bran would be looking and seeing the land of always winter or something, and that was the plan. I don't really put too much like faith in it because George just kind of says shit, and then you have no idea if it's God forbid, like every random piece of shit I say like is held against me or I'm held to it in my life. Any of us, like we all just say random shit. So like I do remember that comment, like, oh, we're gonna see further north than ever. Well, the question is how. The only way is either like new point of view, like maybe you could have a new point of view of some random wildling going super far north, or Bran looking at that from the werewood, or somehow Ghost, but it seems like Ghost would take fucking forever. So either new point of view, and I mean, we kind of heard that Jane Westerling was going to be in the prologue, so that means that was going to be, it was not going to be a North of the Wall kind of prologue. So maybe you have to do a North of the Wall epilogue that goes all the way up there with a random wildling or something, or it's just got to be Bran looking at Land of Always Winter or something from the tree or something. That's it's probably just Bran looking north, kind of like he did in the show. Would be the most probable. Beep 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 beep. Turn off my phone and my iPhone flashlight. Boomer alert. Oh, that's true. John the Fiddler was not exactly a great fighter. No, he immediately lost. Since when does Blackfish get? You're right. It's the implication that because he never married, but it's kind of silly because they should all be marrying. Blackfish not marrying is ridiculous. No matter what. Yes, someone is actually shrinking Cersei's dresses to drive her even crazier. Who is the most likely culprit? Yes, this is a scene from A Feast for Crows where Cersei gets upset at. Is she upset at Dorcas? I forget who she thinks did it, because she gives one of her, after Taina accuses one of her her women, she gives her to Qyburn. But I think it's, I mean, the obvious joke is that she's saying that this woman has been shrinking her dresses when in fact she's just gaining weight because she's been eating and drinking so much. Mainly probably the drinking. And what does she say? Shrunk? Yeah, here we go. Well, Jocelyn was making certain that all was ready for her. Dorcas helped the queen into her new gown. It had stripes of shiny green satin, Mirish lace. The queen looked her best at all time, and her wretched washerwoman had shrunk several of her own gowns, so they no longer fit. Of course, this is the joke: is that she would have whipped them for their carelessness, but Taina had urged her to be merciful. So, yes, trying to remember if there's anything about Dorcas's. I don't think there, like, realistically, I don't think there's any. Jocelyn and Dorcas seem perfectly loyal women. I mean, Taina obviously is the one that's scheming, and so if anyone had somehow shrunk Cersei's dresses, it would be Taina. So I guess that, but or Varys is living in the walls. He can come out, grab the dresses, shrink them, put them back. He's there the whole time. People don't think about Varys being there in A Feast for Crows, but he is the whole time. And when Cersei is like going crazy thinking she hears things in the walls, like she does hear things in the walls. It's Varys. She thinks, and so like this whole thing of how she's like going nuts because she thinks Tyrion is in the walls and she's hearing things. Like, yeah, she is hearing things. I mean, She imagined Tyrion creeping in the walls like a mysterious rat. Take hammers to the walls. He's in the walls. Like she's thinking it the whole time. Um, but it's true that like Varys is in the walls. Like he is making those noises. Um, so Cersei's. It's funny going through it and being like not majority, but like a good portion of like Cersei's insanity is not insanity. Like, Okay. If collapsing to Harrenhal, could you do an entire book just covering no one no longer than normal night? No, I mean the idea is that if you're having like one crazy night kind of story, like like an 80s movie trope is that there's these like one crazy night movies where like all this stuff happens to like these teenagers in one night. But the and so there's and then there's the show episode of Night of the Seven Kingdoms where all these conversations happen in one night. It's my least favorite episode. I fucking hate A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. I think it's the worst episode of Game of Thrones. But the idea is that you're having all of these armies marching towards Harrenhal in the end for some sort of big epic battle that may or may not happen, and that so much can happen if you collapse everyone to Harrenhal. You just want to get all the characters in the same place. And so the idea is, having a new King's Moot, having the Vale forces want to take Harrenhal for Elaine Stone, because that's her seat. They just need a few other reasons for everyone to be coming to Harrenhal. People trying to go to the God's Eye. Maybe the others want to go to the God's Eye. Like that's their way for whatever to win, to extinguish life or whatever. You want to get as many reasons to go to Harrenhal as possible, and then have everybody collapse there. But in the end, you got to have a character go to the God's Eye for the final bit of the story. But you're talking like, when people ask me about like Dream of Spring stuff, I'm just like, oh my God, like you're literally talking about stuff that would take me like at minimum 10 years to get to, 15 years to get to. Jesus. Like I'm just trying to get to the end of the Winds of Winter with the fanfic. Thank you for all you do, PJ. Sunday streams are the best. Thank you. I appreciate it. Incest is also Christian dissonance with Adam and Eve. So the keep in mind, like there's several creation stories that kind of existed around the same time, before like the single Adam and Eve one kind of happened. Like, there's this idea that Adam and Eve are for like one particular people, because obviously like Cain finds these cities, like he goes out into an already populated world. So they're, they were the original people that were trying to compile Genesis. It's a mess with all of the different stories that they shove in there. Two creation myths in a row, contradictions immediately with Cain. And then there's all this stuff, like you've heard of the Book of Enoch and stuff that like was considered canon for a long time, that like retells and reinterprets some of these stories, tries to explain stuff. I mean, it starts talking about like fallen angels and angels breeding with people and shit like that. Like it's very difficult. I think the Christian apologist idea is that incest was okay prior to the New Testament. I mean, not prior to the New Testament, prior to the Ten Commandments. That, or prior to all of the commandments of Moses and things like that. That there hadn't yet been a commandment not to have sex with your siblings, and therefore it was okay in a pre Exodus Deuteronomy laws kind of situation. But of course, that doesn't explain, because it's clearly wrong that Cain killed Abel. So clearly, murder was wrong. So all these things don't really fit. But I don't know. On a genetic level, you're compelled, like, you don't want to do incest. Like, that's just like a regular natural thing, So, top 5 authors that influenced George R.R. Martin. Well, this is actually a pretty easy question. I would say that. All right. Top 5 authors that really influenced him. Writing style, I would say. Definitely Jack Vance. I would say probably Michael Moorcock. I would say definitely Lovecraft. I'd say definitely Robert E. Howard. Oops. Now, who to shove in the last position? Like, these are the ones that I think these ones are like the ones that really, really affect him. If I'm going for the fourth, do you say Tolkien? Is it, Tolkien's the boring answer, because he says and like, oh, Tolkien really affected me and stuff like that. So, I mean, I guess I guess you can say Tolkien, but but at the same time, when you actually read Robert Jordan and stuff, you're like, huh, George really took. I mean, even though he never talks about Robert Jordan, I mean, he does like have House Jourdain and stuff like that, but like Robert Jordan's writing is also very similar to George R. R. Martin's. I feel like a lot of ideas were taken from Robert Jordan, but I think like on like as a youth, where he's talking about people that really like shaped George R. R. Martin as a person and as a writer and how he viewed writing and everything. I think this is your list. I think you got Jack Vance, Michael Moorcock, H.P. Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard, and Tolkien. I think would be the 5 that influenced him the most. Yeah, I mean, you definitely have these poets and comic book guys. Don't get me wrong, that's true. But that's the thing. And I do agree that like writing style, not at all for Tolkien. Tolkien, like, Tolkien's writing style is not George R. R. Martin's. Well, if you read, first of all, if you read Jack Vance, you're like, oh my God. Like, this is like Jack Vance is just like, oh my God, clearly George R. R. Martin is trying to imitate this guy's writing style. Like Jack Vance, it's like overwhelming. Michael Moorcock, more about like tone and idea and like atmosphere. Same with Lovecraft, atmosphere. Lovecraft about the mixing poetry and prose aspect. Robert E. Howard, more about the bluntness and the grimness of it all. Same with Moorcock. And then Tolkien, if you're just saying, okay, you got a fantasy environment and everything. But like I said, but if you're talking about like writing style, I think like Robert Jordan probably influenced him more on a writing styles case, but but maybe, yeah, some ideas or whatever. But it's, yeah, there's a lot of Dune in there because Dune affects everything else. When you start talking about like Bene Gesserit conspiracies of breeding and stuff, and that being taken by Robert Jordan and stuff. But yeah. So, but it's true. Yeah. Jack Vance by number one by a mile. Yeah. And you could just crack open a Jack Vance book and like just read 2 pages and you're just like, oh my God, like this is, yeah. But okay, final question here. Yeah, Herbert definitely prophecy stuff. Yeah, but I don't know if it's like Herbert. It's the same with Tolkien. Like you're not sure if you're hitting something in a secondary source because they influence so many people. Like who's getting hit like next? Like Asimov too. Like Asimov. Like are you getting stuff from Asimov or like Asimov's like massive ripple? Like there's no sci-fi writer that has a bigger impact than Asimov. Every fucking idea in science fiction is an Asimov idea. It's just, or you could claim that Jules Verne or something, but like it's just so huge. It's the same with Tolkien. Like what point? But yeah. No, Herbert's prose is definitely different, but it's about like the bluntness. Like when you're talking about like limbs getting ripped off and I mean Frank Herbert's prose is I'm sorry, for a second my mind farted and I was like talking about Robert Howard. Howard's prose it's different from George's, but it's if you're talking about like limbs getting cut off and like sprays of blood and shit, that's like all taken from Robert E. Howard. And like sex being a vital part of the story and the human condition is, Robert E. Howard is big on that. Michael Moorcock more on like the internal struggles and the hating yourself and the pain and all of that. Lovecraft on the creepiness, and then just Jack Vance just on fucking everything. Like Jack Vance, it's just you're writing a fucking Jack Vance story. But yeah, Herbert's prose is very, very different. I don't actually think Herbert's prose is very good, but Herbert's ideas are incredible. But man, but yeah, Dune ideas are everywhere. So like Dune's impact is, I'd say number one would be Patrick Rothfuss. Patrick Rothfuss, I mean, in terms of never finishing at least. Patrick Rothfuss, I mean, God, he's just like, he's like a hyper George R. R. Martin. Like page for page, Patrick Rothfuss is a better writer. Like page for page. Patrick Rothfuss is a beautiful, beautiful writer. He's incredible. He is. He also will never finish another book. And, it's a shame. It's a shame. What a beautiful, like fucking beautiful, beautiful writer. He is a, like for what he wrote, he is a better writer than George R. R. Martin, Patrick Rothfuss, but he page for page, but same problem. He'll never finish anything. So, anyway, guys, thank you so much for being with me tonight. This one turned out. I was nervous about this topic tonight. Didn't think there was going to be that much, but I think I think there was actually a lot. Anyway, good good evening. Thank you guys all for really good questions, and I hope you guys had a fun time. I will talk to you guys this week. You should see a new train. I did another headcanon, so you'll see a headcanon this week if you're excited about headcanon. So anyway, I will talk to you guys later. Bye.